Graham, thank you so much for joining me on The Same Drugs. It's so great to see you again. How are you doing?
Well, that's a difficult question. Let's not start with that.
I didn't even mean that in a casual way. It sounds like a casual way to start a conversation, but I realize that
Well,
in your circumstances, how are you might be a more complicated question.
yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah, it's a very complicated question, depending on how much people want to actually hear me answer the question truthfully. I've had to go back on the anti-anxiety medication. Been finding it a little bit difficult to um, you know, be motivated about anything. And I got a kind of, I've been depressed, So yeah, so I'm going back on the medication, and my psychiatrist, he said the stuff that I'm on, he said, is the gold standard, and he said it's really, really good. He just thinks it's brilliant. And so, yeah, I thought, why not? Why go around constantly and anxious and unable to make decisions? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm back on venlafaxine.
I mean, I don't know anything about these medications, so I'm glad that these are working for you. I hope that these are working for you.
Yeah, and I would say, though, I would recommend that if you are doing without them, then try and maintain that. Try and maintain the ability to do without them, because I don't know. I just I feel like they deaden your experience of life a little bit.
Oh, okay.
You don't get the lows, but the highs are not as high either. So that there's I mean, I'm not getting on roller coasters or taking cocaine, but you do want to kind of watch a film and feel, feel something. So it's kind of an interesting double bind. Um, but yeah, I haven't really started but I just got the prescription, and so yeah, it's time to get back on the hayride, the very gentle hayride.
I mean, you've been going through a hard time, to say the least,
Yeah.
for probably over a few years now. When did this all begin, would you say?
2018, 2017 or 2018, when I had cancer, and it happened while I kind of there was a piece by Heather Brunskill Evans. I only know this because I found it out after writing the book, and I tweeted it, and I said, look, this is what I think about trans issues, because there were things floating about, all the witch finders were noticing the likes and all that sort of stuff, and they were reporting to the other members of the mob, and I thought, okay, for the first of many times, I just have to explain what's going on. Children are being mutilated and sterilized. Women are being harassed for talking about it, and talking about their own rights, and women's sports are being destroyed. And Heather Brunskill Evans's piece covered a lot of this. And I just thought, as I always thought, and I thought, as I say, a billion times since, this will show people that it's not bigotry, or it's not like hatred of marginalized people. This will show people that actually you need to stand up for the women in your lives, by opposing this stuff. And nothing ever worked. Nothing ever worked. So the Heather Brunskill Evans piece, all that did was ignited a kind of a burner under my reputation. It just as soon as I came out as a TERF, there were thousands of people just attacking me, or Turfala, I should say, and it just continued. And I thought, oh well, I'll share this story about this young detransitioner who regrets what she's been through. That will show people that this is something you should be talking about and taking seriously. And that didn't work either. You know, activists would find phrases or the way I'd express certain things and screen grab it and share it and give their own, you know, always the very, as you know, the way they work, the very worst interpretation of everything you've said. You know, in fact, they even used a joke I did to my wife where I said, "Don't call me a misogynist, you bitch," something throwaway like that, you know.
Yeah.
And they screen grabbed that and used that as an example, you know, that I was a misogynist. So, you know, what was shocking was I went from being you know, quite well liked because of Father Ted and the IT crowd and Black Books and all the sitcoms I'd worked on, that I thought were fondly enough remembered that people would actually look into what I was saying and join with me and kind of make the case that we should be at least allowed to talk about this stuff. But all I got was dead silence from everybody. Everybody would be nodding as I told them. You know, I'd be telling Arthur, my old writing partner, or Neil Hannon, or Chris Morris, or Amanda Iannucci, or actually no, I never spoke to Amanda Iannucci about this. Sorry, these are all British comedy personalities, so you won't know them. But you're telling them, and they're going, yes. But when it comes to the crunch, they're dead silent. And in fact, when they had the opportunity to stand behind me, my colleagues, Arthur Matthews, Neil Hannon, Jimmy Mulville, on the TED musical, all decided to throw me under the bus, you know, just kind of, you know, I was absolutely at the end of waiting for them to speak up and say, hey, you know, this is obviously all true. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's obviously all true. Men cannot turn into women. Men should not be allowed to go into women's spaces. Children are not born in the wrong body. Children do not need to be medicalized out of any mental condition they have.
Yeah.
And nothing took for these people. They just nodded, and then when it came to it, no help at all, you know?
I wonder if you think, I mean, it's such a disappointing thing to learn about people. You know, I had similar experiences in Vancouver, although I think in terms of what you were saying at the beginning, which is that, you know, you just thought, if I just explain this, then people will understand. And I'd felt that way about before I started speaking out about the issue of trans activism and gender identity ideology. Before that really came up in the culture, I had been doing so much work around prostitution and getting brutally attacked over that. And I kept thinking, if I just explain my position, then they'll understand and they'll stop attacking me in these ways, that are completely lacking in intellectual integrity to start, and never mind the unnecessary vitriol. So I think I already was sort of used to the not understanding, but the lack of people standing with you, you know, the people bailing on you and abandoning you, in many cases people you've known for a long time, sometimes just acquaintances. I mean, but for me, it wasn't everybody. It was some people, and that was bad enough. But there were some people also who did stand with me. For you, do you think that that kind of total abandonment had to do with the industry that you're in? You know, is there something about TV or the arts or something?
Yeah, I had one early on. A computer game designer wrote to me, someone who was involved in quite a big game that I enjoyed, and they said, and this is, I think, true of people who work in entertainment in one way or another. And he said, I've got a whole studio. All these people's lives depend on me. I can't say anything publicly because I have to think of them. And the reason that it's so bad for the maker of this game is because these games live or die by online reviews. So trans rights activists can do their usual thing of swarming and creating a false impression around the thing, and that's kind of that's what people saw. Well, I don't know. It's a very weird thing, but basically that's what happened to me. I was just swarmed. And as you say, there was no integrity to any of the accusations. There was nothing behind them. And I thought, because these people were my friends and also my colleagues, that they would look into it, and they would say, "Oh, hang on a sec, this is bullshit. This is all bullshit." Like, for instance, I put this in the book, but a funny thing that happened with Neil Hannon was Neil Hannon said, some of the things you've done, he said to me on the phone, some of the things you've done have been questionable. And I said, give me an example. Give me a single example. And there was a pause. And he said, well, outright, maybe not. So you have people who you've known for your whole life, right? I reviewed Neil Hannon's first album for Select magazine. It was one of the first big reviews he got in the UK, and we've been friends ever since. And you have someone who knows you that well, who's that close a friend, and they can't even look up what it's all about. They can't even find out what I've been accused of, so they can pretend that I've done something wrong too. They didn't even have enough interest to do that. And it is, I think of what I feel like I'm kind of a normal person in terms of how I think about friendship, and I think of what would have happened if it had been the other way around, and someone I knew was being hurt and losing their livelihood and losing everything, and they would just kind of not look into it, and never have an opinion on it, and pretend that my view, which is, and I won't go through the full list, but children shouldn't be mutilated because they walked, as one writer put it, they walked down the wrong toy aisle. It's an absolutely disgusting scandal, and no one cared enough about either the own women, the women they have in their own lives, or me, to actually speak up, to say, hang on a sec, this is insane, So it is galling and it is bizarre. And I still feel like I'm sleepwalking through all this because I took a bet on people. I thought, no, people are good. People will see these young detransitioners with no breasts, who've ruined their health. With testosterone, and they'll see, and they will say, no, this is something that we really urgently needs to be talked about. And Graham, looking into it, Graham appears to not be just, a bigot, but they couldn't do it. None of them could do even that tiny, tiny thing, And as a result, and the thing is, it would have only taken a few people. If Arthur had said something, if Neil Hannon had said something, there would be a much wider debate going on right now. But because the people who speak out, like myself and Rowling and whoever else, because we're always isolated, we're allowed to be just kicked to death in full view of everybody. Sorry, Megan.
No, don't apologize. I think that it's, I don't want to say, people aren't good, but I think that it is a real self-interest, like it's a funny thing. I've spent years, as you probably have as well, trying to figure out the why. Why don't people stand up when they see something wrong is happening? Why don't they tell the truth when they know the truth? I don't think that most people who are or have been supportive of trans activism or these narratives around trans women or women necessarily all literally believe that men who identify as trans women are literally female. But they say it anyway, despite the fact that they see that these words have negative consequences. Whether or not early on they realized the consequences, for example, for women in prison and women and girls change rooms and for kids. Now, they at least at the time, I know, saw what was happening to women in the culture and in their personal lives and what's happened to somebody like you in your life. They've seen the behavior of trans activists, which is so violent and so hateful and so misogynist, and still they take the side of these people and don't stand up for the people who are under attack for saying things that are usually pretty reasonable.
What's unreasonable? I always say to them, tell me one unreasonable thing we're saying, Sorry, Megan.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, why is it unreasonable to say that trans women are men? But, people, it's sort of similar to when I wonder, how do people get involved with cults? And so many people get involved in cults, and you look at them and you watch these documentaries and you're like, or you see, I've had friends who've gotten involved in what I think it's fair to label these organizations or these groups cults, and I see it and they don't see it, and you're like, what is happening here? There must be some sort of like human trait. What do you think that is?
I think it happens. Whatever it is, I think it happens in workplaces and schools and places where people are gathered together. I think perhaps one of the reasons why you and I have been immunized against this is because we're our own boss.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that was always true for you, Megan, but it's always been true for me. I've always been a freelancer, and so when people were starting to say silly things, I wasn't one of the boiling frogs, but a lot of people in offices were, and you have your job hanging over you, you have your social circles watching you, everyone has a mobile phone, so everyone is an informer. That funny thing I was thinking the other day in mafia movies, he's wearing a wire, and now everyone's just got a phone on them that they can turn on at any time and record a conversation. So it's like we're now living in an episode of The Wire, but we've all got these microphones all around us, and so everybody just gets very self-conscious and very scared and doesn't want to say the wrong thing, and they're right too, because Rachel Mead, I don't know if you've been following that story over here, but there was a social worker, Rachel Mead, and she was reported for putting things on a Facebook post and lost her job, and she just won her case. And so the Maya Forstater ruling kind of put it down. You can't discriminate against women for these opinions, these perfectly normal opinions that 86% of people have. You can't do that. But the Rachel Mead case now has said you really, really can't do that. And I believe that the ruling, some people are thinking that it might mean aggravated damages, which I believe is a very good thing. So it's going to start hitting them in the pocket, anyway, sorry, I forget why I got onto this. Why did
why do people go along? Why do people fall into these kind of cult-like or just nonsensical? It's like it's groupthink.
Absolutely, and it's also, I think, what we're living in a world that's very analogous to, is that the way you say it? To the world Europe, certainly just after the invention of the printing press, where basically everyone who read the Bible, which was everyone who could read, wrote their own kind of conspiracy theories about what certain dates meant and so on. And so they created all these cults, like Protestantism was just one of many. the one that stuck. But a lot of the others were kind of crazy and involved, massacres and suicides and all this sort of thing, and lots of predictions of the end of the world. So it was a kind of a time of unreason, even though the printing press is a net good for humanity. But we went through this period of absolute madness, and I think that's exactly what's happened after the internet, with the appearance of the internet. Like, for instance, I don't think the trans movement would have happened without pornography.
Right.
It wouldn't have taken hold in the way that it has. And it may not even have come up in the way that it has. So, like, we've never had a conversation. I've never seen, for instance, at a presidential debate, people saying, what are we going to do about the fact that every 10-year-old can see women being raped?
Yeah, it drives me crazy. And I tweeted something to that effect recently, which was to say, like, how can you be so vehemently opposed to gender identity ideology and also not be critical of or opposed to pornography? They're so interconnected. And as you say, and I think maybe people don't know about the origins of transgenderism still in the ways that we do, because we've been studying this for so long. But it's that conversation has begun to come up, and these people, I think, can understand, for men, for most, in my opinion, and probably in your opinion, for most adult men, this is about a fetish. It's about autogynephilia, and that's fueled by pornography. And we can see that transgenderism, the way that transgenderism has affected kids, has so much come from the internet and from porn culture. And it's totally baffling to me that these people who think of themselves as very critical thinkers, as the heterodox thinkers, challenging dominant ideology, questioning the corporate narrative, and you look at the porn industry, and this is one of the biggest, most profitable industries in the entire world. It's one of the most, if not the most exploitative, because it's obviously connected to trafficking and to prostitution, violent, so on and so forth. And then all they can say is free speech.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I don't hear much speech in this stuff.
No, my offense isn't necessarily, I don't like the speech in pornography, but that's not my main criticism.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know. It's one of those things, and again, like pre-2018, 2017, when I got back on Twitter after being banned for 2 years, the first thing I said was, I reserve the right to not agree with anything I said before 2018. Because gender ideology has just destroyed most of the pillars that held up my political viewpoint before then, and I now question absolutely everything I thoughtlessly accepted and relayed, like a node in some sort of system of misinformation, So it was true, so it was not true. But I'll tell you what it all was. It was all based on my emotions, and it was all based on a form of political discourse that I didn't realize was coming in from America. It was really snide and dismissive, and had a kind of sneering left-wing superiority, as if there was no question that the left didn't have everything right, and that anyone on the other side was contemptible, And of course, we saw how this then went into, like, early examples of attacking the attacks on Hillary Clinton from the left, which further hobbled an already very weak campaign, but brought like 4 years of Trump, So these things were in ascendance, these kinds of ways of thinking about the world, good and evil, on a left-right axis, you know. And I added to that because I was in my own bubble. I was reading The Guardian, which turns out to be absolute trash.
Yeah.
You know, The Independent, which is has a very dodgy editor publisher. Lebedev, I think his name is, and all these kinds of approved media in the UK. You know, I'm sure it's the same over there. That, like, someone who reads The Guardian would not read the Daily Mail, and vice versa. You know, it's very polarized.
Yeah, I mean, in Canada, we don't really. We do a little bit now, but back before I started questioning the left and mainstream media in general, we didn't really have much of a right-wing media. It's not like in the US where there's like a Fox News and a CNN. There was the CBC, which I grew up listening to, which is our public broadcaster. And then there was a series of other sort of middle of the road or progressive-ish publications. And even, like publications that are considered to be conservative are not anywhere near the sort of right-wing media in the US. So, I was so left that I thought, a lot of the left and liberals were not left enough. I mean, I'm always amused at what Americans are talking about when they're talking about the left wing, because to me, that's what I would have called liberals in the past. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me anymore. These labels don't matter so much, but I didn't even think about the right, because I was just never exposed to right-wing people or ideas for most of my life.
And also, I realized later on that, like, a lot of the people who had what I would call a stink around them, there's certain people who have a stink around them, and it's based on nothing. It's based on nothing. I'll get a few examples. Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan said a bunch of stuff during COVID, and they went for him. But I think the real reason they went for him is because he interviewed Abigail Shrier. I don't think they could give a fuck about COVID. I think they didn't like that he was interviewing Abigail Shrier and yourself and other feminists, So taking him down seemed to me to be related to that. And as we both know, sorry, Megan, I know you, but I'll just say I'll just wrap this up very quickly. But Jordan Peterson, his original sin was the argument with the kids on the outside the university, where he said that he wouldn't observe preferred pronouns, or he wouldn't be forced to use preferred pronouns. So again, a stink builds up around people, and it's based on nothing. They're not right wing. Rogan's not right wing. Neither is Peterson.
No, yeah, Rogan's not right wing at all. I mean, I think you're right that it is so much to do with the people that he talks to, and they're people that you're not supposed to talk to, who say things that you're not supposed to say, and so then they will go after him for anything they can imagine going after, like true or not, or bad or good or whatever.
He's just an enemy of the state, like, all right, so I call it enemy of the regime. There's an online regime, and basically they decide who gets cancelled and who doesn't get cancelled. And they decided years ago that Peterson was cancelled. So, ever since then, like, you notice with things like I saw one woman on a TV show, sneering at Peterson because she said, your book of telling people that they should make their beds, And there was this, and basically that was the line that everyone was repeating in all these reviews and all these kind of takedowns. He tells boys to make their beds. Well, I could have figured that out. It's just fucking hell. And then you read the book, and it's actually a very responsible, very beautiful, compassionate insight into what makes life worth living and what makes a good life. Like, I'll tell you another funny thing that happened with Peterson in the Guardian. I think it was a Guardian interview. They deserve it, even if it wasn't. So I'm going to say it's Guardian. But like, Peterson brought them to his house, right? And he has lots of communist posters on the wall,
Yeah.
like old, those beautiful color, they do look great, some of those posters, And the interviewer, who's obviously got is obviously anti Peterson, says, I noticed there's lots of communist posters on the wall. Why aren't there any Nazi posters on the wall? I thought you were even-handed in your feelings about dictatorships. And it's like, do you really want them to have Nazi posters on the wall? Do you know what I mean? They don't hear themselves.
That's your gotcha.
That's their gotcha. Like, why don't you have Nazi posters up here, And the thing is, they then relay this, and everyone reads it and goes, "Oh yeah, why does he? They don't even know what they're fucking agreeing with, and it's just all based on trying to find every single chink in the armor, and we all have them because we're all human. That you can poke a dagger through, you know."
Yeah, I mean, I thought, and one of the interesting things that I found in your book, which actually I want to show those watching. So Graham has written a wonderful, brilliant book, Tough Crowd. Is it available in the US right now, or just the UK?
Yeah, US and Australia.
US also. Okay, awesome. And you talked about your regrets, and I think you even apologized in the book to, like, Milo Yiannopoulos warned you, when he was getting canceled and like brutally attacked online, he said to you, don't think that they won't come for you too. And you were like, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm one of the good ones. They'll never come for me.
Yeah. And I again, I had been absorbing just these attitudes from other American commentators online, and never quite questioning them, never trying to root them. Like, basically, for instance, like, I saw there was a very interesting thing. Who was this guy this happened to? It was some online bloke. I think it was it was the Needle Drop. You know the Needle Drop? Anthony Fontana or Fontana? No. Fontano, I think it is. Well, he's like, he's known as the internet's busiest music nerd. That's how what he calls himself. And I saw a video about him, and essentially, when he started off, he would have his music review show, but he would also have a very kind of edgy comedy show, and it was the type, and this is what I just thought, this blew my mind when I saw it. So I remember at the time hearing that Anthony Fontana was part of Gamergate, and I immediately got up on my high horse, and was like, ah. And I didn't know where maybe I saw a screen grab taken out of context, as happened to me several times after that. But anyway, I made my decision about him, and then I saw this documentary the other day, and one of the things they did to him, right, was that they have a screen grab of him, and there's a black guy behind them with a rope around his neck. Okay, and this is presented as evidence of his racism or alt-rightism or whatever it happens to be. But it turns out it was part of a long thing that was capturing, I think, a trend on TikTok or Vine or whatever was the equivalent at the time, or Reddit or something, where kids were putting toilet paper around their neck and pretending to hang themselves. It was really funny. You just see loads of different pictures of all these kids, different sizes and ages, and they have the toilet paper around their neck, and they're just about to jump off. It's quite a funny, sweet, if slightly dark joke, But this guy in the picture was just one of them, right?
Okay. But
they froze the image, and they have him with a black guy with what looks like a rope around his neck. And they don't explain. They don't explain what it was. They don't give you any context beyond that. And so basically, I mean, I don't know what he did to piss people off, but they just decided, well, let's get him. And the documentary says that he actually eventually gave up the comedy stuff. It was just he was making, he was doing well as the music nerd thing anyway, but he gave up the comedy stuff, and who can blame him if that's how they're interpreting, you know what I mean? An innocent moment.
I never really got involved with the whole Gamergate thing because I never really understood it. But as I understand it, you got pretty involved. What was Gamergate about?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things about it. Like, that question in itself is heavily contested. The way I thought of it was that it was a misogynistic hate campaign because a girl was unfairly accused of sleeping with a reviewer for scores, computer game review scores. She was a indie game developer. He was a music journalist.
It was Zoe Quinn. Was that her name?
Zoe Quinn, yeah.
And who was the guy? Do you know?
I don't know the guy. I think he was with Kokatu, the gaming website. I could be wrong, but I know that the reason it all kicked off was because the boyfriend wrote the ex-boyfriend of Quinn wrote a long kind of screed accusing her of all sorts of things, which I also didn't read. So again, I wasn't going from first sources. I was going from things like Boston Magazine, which had, like Boston fucking Spotlight, you expect a magazine to be an authority on this stuff. So when you see a long piece that takes you through it and says, this is what happened and this is why it happened, you just believe it. But again, since what happened to me, I started to realize, oh, well, maybe this isn't this isn't the full story. Like, for instance, I remember at one point, there was a big joke that they used to make fun of the Gamergaters for saying it's about ethics in gaming journalism. And that became a kind of a meme on the other side, making fun of it. Like, it was, again, that sneering, superior, dismissive thing aimed at people who, some of them really were worried about ethics in gaming journalism. Some of them were just misogynists and anime avatars who were taking advantage of yet another opportunity to bash women, Then those same people, I think a lot of them turned over.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
The people who are going after so-called TERFs, you mean?
They never changed their anime avatars.
Yeah. Well, and it is so much of the hate and the censorship and the banning from social media, which we both experienced, of course, did come from that group of people, these like progressive computer nerds, basically, people who were working or people who were really involved in gaming, people who sort of know how to manipulate things like Wikipedia, people working in big tech, who probably most of whom, frankly, are porn addicted men, and then they're woke female allies, right?
Yeah. Well,
the very online,
and also, certain, there's, as we know, there's an overrepresentation of autistic people and trans-identified people, and again, there's something about the movement that has a kind of autistic quality, like the obsessive repeating of phrases like trans women are women, repeat, even say it, repeat after us. The division of people into good and evil. These are, I know people who have autistic children, and these are autistic traits,
right.
And they've been kind of injected into the discourse by people who work with computers a lot, and it's like it's got to be addressed. You can't just say that a certain kind of mindset is not influential when they're behind the code we use to speak to each other right now. Do you know what I mean?
What's very interesting about what we're talking about right now is also that it's become very trendy for, the people who've just discovered trans activism and gender identity ideology and have discovered how harmful it is, are blaming feminism and feminists for this. And I think that feminism and feminists there's a lot to be criticized within all of that. And there are a lot of women who call themselves and are considered feminists who have gone along with trans activism bafflingly. But I mean, those were also the women that even back in like 2011, when I was trying to write critically about things like slut walk, and again about prostitution and pornography and BDSM and all this, and the nonsense that third wave feminism pushes, these were women who I didn't even think of as necessarily feminists, but as careerists. These were just women who were working their way up the ranks in the US so they could get some kind of cushy job, and clearly didn't care very much about women's rights at all, because otherwise how can you claim to care about women's rights and go along with transgenderism? But it's so I get that angle, but we know where transgenderism came from, which was from these male sexologists and from these men with fetishes and these like literal misogynists working in big tech and in gaming and from things like pornography. And then still, I get, and lots of other women get this, well, this is all your fault because you supported feminism.
You know what? Well, yeah. I've heard that, and I've also heard where were you? Like, shouldn't you like?
Why weren't you fighting back?
Like, you had to leave fucking Canada because you were fighting back.
Yeah.
It's absolutely outrageous that they say all this.
And where was I? It's like, I mean, we were just trying to put an event on. Like, it was practically impossible. Never mind the fact that then I was banned from Twitter, which actually in some ways, I mean, I hated it and I thought it was awful and wrong, and it had a negative impact on my work in lots of ways. But at the same time, it allowed me certain platforms to be able to talk about what was going on, and it revealed this crazy bias on the parts of big tech where they were injecting politics and ideology into these supposedly neutral platforms, which of course are not neutral in any way at all. But I mean, where were all the feminists? It's like, well, man, like, you could have sent us some money so that we could hire security, or you could have helped us find an event venue that wouldn't cancel on us last minute. You could have published us when no one else would publish our warnings early on. I mean, it's so maddening. And I know that people probably get sick of me talking about it because I do talk about it so much, but it makes you want to pull your hair out, because like, well, we were doing everything we could, but we have no power. We have no money. We have no pull. We're not connected to political power or any institutions or anything. Or I certainly wasn't anyway.
Quite the opposite. Politicians avoid, refuse. They don't respond to letters from feminists. They refuse meetings.
I mean, I tried to meet with my political representatives many times. I tried to have phone conversations, and they won't even respond. And these were political representatives who I knew or had met before. It wasn't like they didn't know who I was. There were the people that I'd had conversations with around things like prostitution law, but then I try to bring up gender identity and there's radio silence.
Yeah. Well, and also, we can't underestimate like the fact that nearly every big social media website suddenly took on rules about misgendering. And misgendering is a really, having a prohibition against misgendering is a very good way of just completely disappearing a whole tranche of feminist thought, right? So what we had for like 5 years or so was a world where there was no radical feminist thought, except when it was misreported and misrepresented. And do you know what I mean? So it's been a shocking cover-up, really. I often think of this whole thing as it's a cover-up. It's like they're covering everything up, from what's happening to kids at the Tavistock to what's to what people like yourself want to say. It's all a big fucking cover-up. It's extraordinary to be in it.
One thing that I've never been able to figure out that I'm curious about is because the night that I was banned from Twitter, permanently, although of course Elon brought me back about a little over a year ago. The night that I was banned, it was November of 2018, and it was a Friday night, and it was like 11 p.m. or something like that. So it was really weird timing, and about maybe an hour tops, if not even less than that, after I received this email saying that I'd been permanently suspended for hateful conduct, for breaking Twitter rules, and then referencing these now famous tweets around misgendering Jonathan Yaniv and saying that men aren't women. The Pink News published an article announcing that Twitter had a new rule against dead naming and misgendering, which again is weird timing because that would have been 7 a.m. on a Saturday over there. And then I also recall that this Adrian Harrop person sort of gloating about it in a way that made me think that maybe he had something it seemed like he was trying to take some partial credit for it. Jonathan Yaniv also took credit for it. So who really knows? But I was curious to know, you write a little bit about this Adrian Harrop person in the book, and you probably know more about him than I do because he's from the UK. What are your thoughts on him? What do you know about him?
He's just a sadistic online bully of women. I mean, it's that simple. It's basically there are certain people out there who despise women and want to hurt them as much as they can, and that's Adrian Harrop. He wants to cause distress. When Caroline Farrow was being targeted, he took a photograph of her church just to show that he was in the area, So, and his mate, who is the same person who reported me to the police, a con man named Stephanie Hayden, who this is like the third of his names that he's had, third or fourth. He also joined in this harassment of this woman, So, they're just people. They had an attitude which was, they would just do whatever they had to do to get back at you. If you annoyed them, they would just, and that involved, like, Hayden phoned the police and sued me on the same weekend. So, for my wife, it was just terrifying, and that was deliberate. That's what he does to everyone. He tries to frighten people, tries to make sure the police visit. He sues them. And then after a couple of days of stress, he says, if you give me 500 quid, I'll go away. That was his racket. It is his racket. He's still getting away with it. He's still out there. He's just started proceedings against another woman. I think he's on benefits. He travels around the world, leaving fucking TripAdvisor reviews everywhere. Do you know what I mean? He's a con man. This
is so funny because this is sort of similar to Jonathan Yaniv, who now calls himself Jessica Yaniv.
Stephanie Hayden has often been called the UK's Jonathan Yaniv.
Oh, okay, yeah, because he's basically, his shtick is trying to blackmail people into giving him money or free stuff, and then he just discovered that trans activism could help him in this regard. He's also, a pervert and a predator. But the reason that one of the reasons that he was discovered, when his name was under a publication ban, and a blogger who's I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name right now, discovered what his real identity was because he has this massive paper trail on social media of these Yelp reviews and things like that, where he would go to, he would order a pizza and then claim that the pizza arrived and all the toppings had fallen off, and now you owe me free pizzas for life, otherwise I'm going to sue you, on and on and on and on. And this was, under his male name, Jonathan Yaniv, his male face, which was connected to all of his social media profiles, which were either his male face and his male name, or some of them would be, his male face, and then it would say two different pronouns like he and her. There was no, when I was banned from Twitter for misgendering Jonathan Yaniv and my other crimes of saying men aren't women, he wasn't identifying as a woman, he was sort of, in some places would put she, in some places would put he, and he wasn't trying in any way to look like a woman.
But the thing is, he was the tool that Twitter used to get rid of you.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Mm-hmm. They did that's how basically Twitter. I don't know. Are you shadow banned at the moment?
I don't know if I am on Twitter. I am. Meta has shadow banned me, so on Facebook and Instagram definitely, and on YouTube I am, but on Twitter I'm not technically shadow banned. I have no idea what the algorithm is doing with me, but I know that when I go to search you on Twitter, you don't come up.
Yeah,
and Posey also doesn't come up.
And
when
Posey
I search
doesn't.
her.
And Posey doesn't come up. Now, there's two reasons that might be. One is that Elon Musk just doesn't give a damn about this issue, which except to sometimes get a sound bite about the woke mind virus or something like that. Because if he did care about it and he could do something about it, he would presumably be making sure that we had, our accounts were working as normal.
Yeah.
The other thing, which is what people tell me is happening, is that the algorithm has us baked into it. Like they can't figure out why my account is shadow banned. They can't figure out why Kelly J's account is shadow banned. That's the story they're saying at the moment. There's thousands of lines of code, and they just, I would say do a search on the code for the name Graham Linehan. Try and find that in there and just delete. Right. I think it'll be all right then, But we're still being kept quiet as much.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I mean, the people whose voices are amplified on this thing are still, it's always been transgenderism, the debate around gender identity ideology from the beginning has been positioned intentionally by the media and by politicians and for whoever else it's convenient for as a left versus right issue. So, they couldn't, some other people would be represented in the media or sometimes even interviewed about their opposition to transgenderism, although very rarely, but they could only be people considered these evil right, far right bigots. It couldn't be me because I was left wing and I was a feminist and I was a socialist. So I couldn't be included in that conversation. And now things have opened up quite a lot, but still the debate is still being positioned as left versus right, and the voices that are being amplified as, the only people fighting this and the only people making a difference are people like Matt Walsh, for example, and still the people who were, were never on the right. Not that I don't have a problem with right-wing people. There's lots of great right-wing people. I don't really think of things in those terms anymore. But the people, like us and the feminists who are fighting for so long are still sidelined and marginalized because I think the narrative people don't like that narrative very much. Absolutely.
It is what it is. I don't think you can push it or force it. I just think you have to, I will say this fight, these last 5 years have thrown up so many stories of like real decency and bravery. And like, I'm thinking about people like Keira Bell and, the people at GenSpect and, there's and yourself, and Kelly J. I mean, there's so many real stories of bravery and resistance that I think that
like all the female athletes who are speaking out, which destroys their athletic career. Riley Gaines, April Hutchinson in Canada.
If Clint Eastwood was a younger man, he would keep him in about 10 more films. It's like there's just so much like heroism go around in this, you know. And I think that the great thing about the stories that we've experienced over the last few years is that people love a good story, you know. So I think that it's just a matter of time before, like you know, Kelly J. I look at Kelly J's activism in the same way that I think of you know, any civil rights person who marched into a group of policemen knowing that the policemen would be hitting them and attacking them with dogs. You know, Kelly J went to places where the crowd was worked up into such a frenzy that, as we both know, one 74-year-old woman was actually punched by one of these lunatics. You know, it was you know, that's just bravery that you don't. It's not common. It's very, very uncommon. And yeah, I think that eventually all these stories will be told. You know, this has been such an interesting time these last few years, but these last 5-6 years, and at the moment they wouldn't dare approach it to make a TV show or a series or anything about this, but that will change. You know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, your book isn't just, despite our conversation, it isn't just about what's happened to you when you started speaking out about transgenderism. It's not just about the fight. I mean, the first half of the book is about your life and your career and where you got started. And one of the things that I did learn is that you're sort of like an art snob. And I thought it was funny because I felt like the way that you feel about 70s movies is kind of like how I feel about 80s movies, except that 80s movies aren't highbrow, but those are sort of like the formative movies to me that I still watch over and over. And you probably would think they were stupid, but I mean, I really love like Pretty in Pink and like Ghostbusters and Meatballs and stuff like that.
Oh, I love John Hughes. I love John Hughes. Although I did watch The Breakfast Club with my daughter, and it was very uncomfortable.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
it's a little bit. The red-haired girl gets a pretty hard sexist time from the bloke, and we were.
I'd have to It's one of those things where it's like I watched those movies so many times when I was a kid, and you know, and like Dirty Dancing, and you know, what else did I watch a million times over? I mean, Back to the Future, obviously, and the things that you don't really pick up on then when you watch. As an adult, you're like, oh goodness.
Yeah, and sometimes like I see it through my kids' eyes, and it's like you know, there's a really weird bit in Ferris Bueller where the principal thinks that the girl is having sex with her father because Ferris is dressed up as her father, and he kisses her, and the principal goes, "Oh, so that's how it is."
I don't even remember that part.
Yeah. So there's all these moments, and in the Goonies, like in the opening of the Goonies, there's a scene where what's his name? Corey Haim. Is that his name? Corey something. He's showing
that movie either.
He's showing the new Mexican housemaid around the house, you know, and he's lying to her. He's saying things like, "This is where my parents have their sex dungeon," you know. And I was watching it with my kids, thinking, "What the fuck? What?" And it was just such a, I don't know. It was like a much more explosively, I don't know, reckless.
I think there were, you know, when you think about these 80s movies that like we watched when we were kids, I think there were a lot of sort of more like dirty jokes and sex jokes in those movies.
Yeah. Well, you know, I watched what's it called? Cinema Paradiso recently, you know. And
I don't remember that one either. I know that I did see that when I was young. But.
Well, you know, it's famous weepy. You know, it's a little boy, and he's friends with the projectionist, and it's heart wrenching, you know. But then there's one scene where the camera is just going through the cinema, and all the audience members are there, and one woman is whacking off the bloke next to him, you know.
Right.
And it's like, Jesus, isn't there anything, you know, that you could watch? But I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether it was worse or better. It was certainly closer to the human experience than what's happening now, you know.
Yeah, I think it was sort of like more normal. And also people were more normal looking. You know, that's sort of what I love about looking back at movies and films or movies and TV shows from the 80s and from the early 90s too, is that everybody's kind of like ugly.
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of interest. Well, I would put it like lots of interesting faces, lest you know, because I'd probably fall into that category of having an interesting.
Well, I mean,
face.
ugly is comparison to what you see now, which is like total
Yeah.
perfection.
Well, you look at someone like what's his name? Christopher Walken. You know, he's a very unusual face, really. You know, and De Niro as well. You know, in certain lights, he has a bit of a Weasley look about him. You know, but I don't know, the magic of cinema. I do like the new. I noticed that there's some very interesting faces coming up now, like that bloke who's in Saltburn, the Irish actor.
I mean, I think men are still allowed to get away with being strange looking, not women so much. I don't think.
That's true. That is very, very true. Yeah, strange looking men are like this Calvin Klein ad with this guy in it. You know, I just thought he's an odd looking short bloke, but like
I don't know what the ad is.
Oh my God! Google Calvin Klein ad, and you'll see everyone's. I've noticed.
I'm gonna look at it right now.
Yeah, people are going nuts about it. But you
Is
know,
is he a bit fat? This guy?
Would you call him fat? I'm not sure. It's like
maybe this is. Oh no, this one is a man in a sports bra who's definitely fat, but I think it's actually maybe a woman.
No,
maybe this is a trans man.
No, it's the one. I don't know what the guy's name is. He's in the thing about the chef. You know.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I found it. Yeah, I mean, I think he's hot.
Jeremy Allen White.
I've always thought he was hot.
Well, you know,
Shameless. I mean, this photo is a bit weird that I'm looking at, but women think he's hot.
I did give in and watch the video, and yeah, he's actually got a kind of a Paul Newman quality. You know, he's got that sort of slightly Greco-Roman profile. You know, it's really I can see it now. You know, but up until then, I just thought he was a kind of interesting, odd-looking bloke who was a brilliant actor. You know.
Right.
But now he's apparently the most handsome man in the world.
I mean, I think I felt like at least for 5 years. Yeah. I think that women who watch Shameless will know what I talk.
Oh yeah.
The American version of Shameless.
Yeah. It passed me by.
I want to ask you a little bit. I mean, you got started in, I think, music writing. Is that right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yes. Like, tell me a bit about who are your favorites and
music-wise? Well, you know, I kind of had a natural progression from. I actually listed in the book the Wombles, who were like a children's TV program, but also had a band.
Interesting. Okay, I've never heard of them.
Yeah, the Wombles of Wimbledon Green. And then I went on from them to, I think, who did I like? Oh yeah, ABBA. I loved ABBA when I was.
Interesting. I don't love ABBA that much. We don't have I feel like I love older music. Like I don't love very much music that was made past the 80s. But then I feel like the only person, you know, in your lists of people, I was like, okay, well, at least he liked Springsteen. At least he wasn't snobbish about Springsteen.
I went on to Springsteen. Yeah, but ABBA was when I was very young. But I've never lost my love for ABBA. I think they're some of the greatest songs ever written. I think they're extraordinary.
But what do you think about the Beatles?
Yeah, I like the Beatles. I didn't really commit to them.
Okay. I think they're the greatest band of all time. That's what I was wondering.
Controversial opinion.
Yeah, I know.
I'm only joking.
But apparently it is. Like, you wouldn't think so because the amount of people in the world who probably also think that. But when you say that, people are like, no, it's the Stones. And I'm like, no, it's not. And I like the Stones, but the Stones are not better than the Beatles. Sorry.
I never liked the Stones. I've never been a huge fan
of their songs.
Of blues. Yeah, the occasional, like Painted Black is incredible. And you can't always get what you want is amazing. But, you know, all that kind of, you know, slightly bluesy stuff, it doesn't really appeal to me. But I do like, if you put that in a different way, the area question, Beatles or Stones, I would say Beatles. Because like far more songs that I love. But also, I just think that they changed the landscape in a way that, like, the physical, actual landscape of the world. I read a brilliant book. I really recommend it. It's called The People's Music by Ian MacDonald.
Okay.
And it's about how the Beatles and Bob Dylan sort of created the 60s, because I always thought they just sort of happened, but it was really the creation of Bob Dylan and the Beatles. They created what we now think of as the 60s. Yeah, it's a fantastic book. In fact, one of the interesting things in it is apparently one of the reasons why Dylan exploded the way he did was because he did a Rolling Stone interview, and he and the writer just sat down and just tried to make it as funny and interesting as possible, and they just kind of wrote it. They just created this interview, and that kind of exploded him into people's minds, and everything took off after that. But I love it because it's such a deliberate attempt to enter in as an intriguing and interesting person, and it's done very intelligently, apparently. It's a brilliant book.
So what do you think about, I've announced several times, I think now, that I think that pretty much all modern music is boring. I don't like modern pop music. You disagree with me? Okay.
I'm going to send you a compilation. You won't be disappointed. The thing I would immediately say is the song that instantly I think will prove that music still has something to offer is a song called "Human" by Molly Sarl. Human. When we finish the interview, look it up. It is the most beautiful song. I've been listening to very little else this last year. It's breathtaking. So yeah.
I'm glad to hear you feel that way, because I've definitely been feeling very cynical about modern everything. I'm like, I feel like there's a lot of really good series, but there's not very many good movies, and I just hate any music that was made after the 90s, practically.
Oh my God. I'm going to change your mind on that, Megan.
And not even necessarily hate. I'm just like, this is so boring. And I just can't get over the fact that, like, the most famous pop star in the world is Taylor Swift. I'm never going to get over it, because I'm like, people. But people are bad. It makes me think people are bad that people love Taylor Swift this much.
I know what you mean, but like, I don't know.
Taste.
I just think that I can forgive her. I don't really know her music, but I just think the opening of "Shake It Off" is the greatest opening to a pop song in decades.
Oh my goodness.
Incredibly catchy. But it's, as always, the good stuff is always kind of underground and hidden away, and it's the same. It's the same now as it's always been. All the crap is the most visible, but all the good stuff is hidden away, and you have to burrow to find it a bit. In fact, it's even with algorithms and everything delivered into your lap, it's still a bit of an exciting process for me to discover new bands and to hear, exciting new people. I'll tell you a great band that again, just a instant. I think you would really appreciate them. A pair of Norfolk girls called Let's Eat Grandma. And they're two sisters, and they are just like, it's two Kate Bushes in the same band, if you can imagine such a thing. Yeah. Okay. And they're like, they look so young. And I saw a concert where one of them is playing the drums and singing, and they don't look old enough to. It's like a school band. It's like a school band just started creating the greatest music you've ever heard in your life. They are geniuses,
Okay.
So yeah, look out for them too.
I'm like trying to think of like modern artists or bands that I have genuinely liked to the same extent that I loved, 90s hip hop or like classic rock or soul or stuff. And there's Amy Winehouse, who I loved.
Yeah.
And I still love. And I'm not thinking of anybody else.
Yeah.
At the moment. I just sound like any other old person I get. It's just that I think I'm right. Like, they don't make anything good anymore.
See what you think. I'll send you.
I never liked new music, though. You know, when I was 10, I was obsessed with the Beatles and the Beach Boys and like the Everly Brothers and the Supremes and stuff like that. So I'm just an old soul, I suppose. One of the things that I felt, you wrote that, you know, one of the sort of harder things was that you couldn't talk about the artists that you liked anymore. You know, once you got canceled, as we sort of call it, you couldn't recommend artists that you loved because then they would be punished for being associated with you.
Exactly, yeah. And you know, you like if you say, oh, you know, it used to be one of the pleasure. You know, I remember once Frank Black of the Pixies was excited that I was following him, and I couldn't believe it. He didn't even realize that I had interviewed him twice in the past. You know, once for Select and once and he just knew me as the author of Father Ted and the IT Crowd or whatever. And so it was just a lovely moment for me. You know, it was like you know, I've been following them since I was 19 years old. But now, of course, if someone like that was to get in touch, I responded back. There would be an anime avatar, or you know, one of my regular trolls who would intervene in the conversation and make sure the person knew that he was talking to the sort of, as someone called me once, Hitler for trans people. You know. So it's hard for, you know, like I don't expect like someone like him. I don't expect him to do what I'm so angry at my friends for not doing, which is look deeply into my situation and figure out what's going on. I don't expect that at all of people like that. I did expect it of my friends, but you know, and also people are at different stages and people have got like different pressures. A lot of people, I think, have trans identified children, especially people of my age, you know, and I think that they're feeding them a line of bullshit that the parents are too frightened to contradict, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, actually, because I think probably a lot of people who were confused, you know, were confused about why they won't say anything, why they won't speak out in defense of women or women's sex-based right or women's spaces or girls. And I think that a lot of people are connected to, or maybe they have family members or something who have kids who they call transgender. And so, you know, they feel like if they're saying something, they're attacked or they're going to be perceived as attacking a kid who's close to them.
That's the, and yeah, and it's also the contagion part of social contagion, you know. I mean, you don't have to be convinced that men can turn into women or any of these things yourself. You just have to know someone who knows someone who has a trans kid, whatever that means. And yeah, you can't say a word or you lose your social circles, you know.
Yeah.
But again, I just think, well, there are more important things in your social circles, and one of them is the safety and health of children, you know.
You said that you could forgive the artists for that mob pleasing kind of behavior, but that you can't forgive the comedians. And I wonder if you can explain that.
Yeah, the musicians. I said I can forgive the musicians.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, because I think when I used to interview musicians, no offense to them, but it was never a fun interview. They don't really think in terms of words, and they don't communicate.
Musicians are usually not that interesting, honestly. Like, I love music, but I don't, when, you know, you hear musicians talking about like politics, I'm like, you're not as interesting as you think you are, or that others think you are.
Yeah, they're just like everyone else, you know. There's a range of, but you know, we interview them expecting them to say these amazing things, but often, you know, like God, the amount of times I would just have four blokes looking at the floor, going, "Yeah, dunno, just wrote it," you know. It was just a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. So I don't really expect them to be engaged with the world in the way that other people, other groups are. The people I do expect to be engaged with the world are comedians, who are supposed to be telling the truth, or at least enough of the truth so that you know why their jokes are funny, you know. But they're not doing that. They're in fact hiding the truth, pretending not to see the truth, avoiding talking about the truth. They're running scared, and they have been for years. So, this is comedy. It's very important. It's another reason why I'm so serious about this issue. It's important to me. Comedy is important to me, and I think that these people are betraying comedy. Because they're pretending that Eddie Izzard going into a women's toilet is just completely normal, not even worth bringing up. And it's like, no, it affects every woman who exists if Eddie Izzard is entering women's spaces. So I have a lot of contempt for people who pretend. I think they're pretending not to understand that issue.
You write about, you don't get into this very much, but you say that your marriage ended on account of the strain of all of this.
Yeah. Well, losing your livelihood. They would send her abuse. They sent the police and sued me. It was just a constant onslaught. And added to that is the fact that every newspaper, every politician, every celebrity is saying that this is all perfectly normal, that it's important that we cut these kids' breasts off or they'll commit suicide. You know what I mean? The whole of society is saying you're wrong, and so it was. And also, one of the ways that they get you is that they just try and isolate you. So basically, I imagine I'd never found out. I'm sure more stuff happened than I was aware of. But my wife, she would have been isolated in the same way. And she would have had a lot, she's a much more social person. So she would have a lot more social pressure put on her, So in the end, it was just, unstoppable force versus a movable object, because she was so terrified of what was happening that she just couldn't change that. And I was so convinced that this was the right thing to do that I couldn't change it. So, that's what happened, Obviously, there's more detail than that I wouldn't want to go into, but it was, it was up until this fucking fight, we barely had a cross word, and it was just, when you're being sued, when the cops are knocking on your door, because of people like Adrian Harrop and Stephanie Hayden, two absolute lunatics who used to kind of coordinate their abuse campaigns online. The pressure just eventually told, and we had to go our separate ways, But it's why I feel very protective of my friend, the artist Birdie Rose, whose boyfriend.
Love her.
Yeah, and her boyfriend is being targeted by these, fucking scumbag former friends who are just kind of relentlessly trying to drive them apart. I just have a lot of respect for them. They're just sticking in there and they're fighting and fighting and fighting for each other. And again, it's another one of these very moving stories that I think will eventually be told.
I find that often, when we go through hard times, through dark times, there is something great that comes out of it, despite the fact that that doesn't mean that the bad thing that happened is the good thing that happened. But have you found yet that there has been something beautiful or good or something that you're grateful for that's come out of all this awful stuff that you've had to endure, including, of course, losing your career?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I have really is pride that I took the stand. I'm extremely proud of that. Despite the anxiety, I sleep like a baby. I know it was the right thing to do. I know that in I'd say less than 5 years, people are going to realize that this was a huge medical scandal and it just happened under everyone's noses and lives were destroyed because of it. So, I feel kind of, well, at least I didn't fucking, at least I said something. At least I said something. And that means a lot to me, But the other thing, which is kind of a work thing, is that, like, as I always say, I used to know only people in the media and no one in real life, and now I know no one in the media. And my circles are kind of like, full of really interesting people from all walks of life, civil servants, lawyers, doctors, therapists, Fred Sargent, book, well, actually, I don't really converse a lot with Book, but, like, we're friendly. Scott Nugent, Debbie Hayton, all these different people, yourself, from all over the world, who are kind of united in just basically not refusing to lie,
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing is, it's just this automatic introduction to a whole range of people, so that, if I ever do manage to write something again, and there's a research question about a particular area, like social work or something, I've just, like, dozens of people I can call up. So yeah, I've had, at a time, I've often in my life thought that I was getting into certain ruts, and this broke me out of it. This broke me out of a rut. So I feel that's, I mean, obviously very painful. Be nice not to be nice to have my musical, which was kind of stolen from me. But in the end, at least I didn't play along. At least I can say I have nothing to do with these poor kids, except that I tried to stop it from happening.
Mm-hmm. So are you planning a move to Mexico or what?
Yeah, I don't know. Someone suggested Wimbledon, which would be a real full circle, considering the Wombles of Wimbledon were my first love. So yeah, I don't know. I do want to get out of where I am, though. I think my time here is at an end. So yeah, maybe Mexico. Who knows?
It was great to talk with you and catch up with you again. Again, for those watching or listening, Graham's book is Tough Crowd. And tell us where people can buy your book.
Just the usual places: Amazon, wherever there are books. Some places aren't stocking it. Some physical bookshops aren't stocking it. They're hiding it and all that sort of nonsense. Mm-hmm. So your best bet is probably to order it online. So,
okay. Well, yeah. Congratulations on the book. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I hope to speak to you again sooner than later, but thank you for your time for now.
Anytime, Megan. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.